Please welcome Juan Martinez.
¿Qué obole familia? What's up? Roughly translated, that means what's up in Espanol. Thank you all. Apologies, I was chatting with Secretary Salazar in the back. So, yeah. I want to ask those of you in the room over the age of 40 to raise your hand. Yeah, raise it high and proud. I want to start off today by saying a thank you for my generation, which has been termed the millennial generation. But your generation, those over the age of 40, were the ones who stood and heeded the call of Dr. King when he asked you to fight for civil rights. Those of you over the age of 40 were the ones that demanded that Vietnam soldiers who were losing their lives across seas could have the right to come back home and vote at the age of 18. You are the generation that picketed the grapes with Cesar Chavez and the Filipino farm workers. And you are the generation that has established an amazing legacy of Great Outdoors Colorado. People like Secretary Salazar and Lisa and some of my mentors who are in this room today, like Ray Rivera, Margaret Lamar, and organizations that were established long ago with a vision of empowering communities for a better tomorrow, like ELK and Groundworks. You guys are the ones leading the movement forward, and I thank you for establishing that legacy, because that legacy has allowed me to be a proud product of that legacy. I stand before you a National Geographic explorer, the youngest member to ever to sit on the Sierra Club Foundation board, a 1% for the Planet ambassador, a North Face ambassador. But all this stems from my roots in South Central LA. And we'll get to that in a little bit as we go along. And I want to talk to you about three things today, and that's legacy, empowerment, and change. I have to take back a couple of things, or not take back, but reminisce on a couple of things. Last time I visited Denver, I was sitting over there at the REI coffee shop, and I looked over to this building in DeVita and thought, that must be a cool view up there. And it's pretty stellar to be sitting here today. And I think about those times, and I think back to something that Secretary Salazar always says, and that's the joy is in the journey. And I think about the times that I've been able to sit at the White House, at the West Wing, and talk about issues of connecting more people to the outdoors. And I think about those moments of sitting in homes of families who are struggling on a day-to-day basis to pay rent, to put food on the table, and I see those moments as opportunities to also bring in a different message of what nature brings to those communities. So that's a powerful legacy that has been bestowed. I love Colorado. I love Denver. Just got to visit Telluride for my birthday not that long ago. But along the way, when I was 16, I got a scholarship to attend an Outward Bound course, a semester Outward Bound course, which allowed me to hike through the Sangre de Cristos, the collegiates, climb 20 of the 14ers, including Mount Elbert, Creststone, and Castle, which are still some of my favorite memories, and forever Denver and Colorado are engraved in my heart. And I think about something that Teddy Roosevelt once said, and that's who Douglas Brinkley called the wilderness warrior, and that's in any moment of decision, the best thing you can do is the right thing, the next best thing is the wrong thing, And the worst thing you can do is nothing. And Colorado is leading the way in that, which, if you're not on social media, I encourage you to be on social media right now, because the nation is listening to you. The nation is looking at Colorado as a leader of the movement of connecting more people to the outdoors. With the recent naming of Luis Benitez as your outdoor rec head, you guys are the first ones in the country to establish that. So hashtag Outdoor Summit at GoCo. So I really applaud that, and thanks so much to Great Outdoors Colorado for inviting me. And as we embark on this journey, I'll break it down into 3 sections. That's, again, legacy, empowerment, and change, and how we build the next generation of conservation legacy. So my story starts in South Central LA. And I grew up angry. I grew up angry because I grew up poor. There were times in my life when I did not know where my next meal was going to come from. And it wasn't because my parents weren't trying. They were trying their best. And I grew up in the shadow of the LA riots, which, after seeing what's happening in Baltimore riots, and the movement there for equity and social justice, it took me back and refocused why this matters so much. I grew up in the LA riots, and I looked outside of my window and slept in. My parents put my 2 younger sisters and I in bathtubs because they were scared that the bullets coming through the windows would hit us at night. And I grew up angry at the world because I felt like I had been dealt the wrong cards. And so I decided, so that's 2 blocks away from where I lived. That's the local supermarket where my mom and I would go get our tortillas and huevos and nopales and food. But that was burnt down during the LA riots. So for about almost 6 months, we had to travel on bus almost 60 minutes to get food and our groceries. But it wasn't always bad. After a period of time when my family and I were homeless, we found our apartment. And the first thing my parents did, was go into the backyard and break through the concrete and find the dirt, find the soil, find the earth. And they started to plant jalapenos and chamomile, aloe vera, and all these plants that I, unaware, took for granted. That this was the way my parents were passing on their culture. I took it just as another chore, that I had to go back there and clean up and water these plants. And at the age of 13, I had been to more funerals that year than birthday parties. And balloons and flowers no longer meant that it was a party. It meant that it was time for another funeral. And I saw so many of my friends and family either end up 6 feet underground or behind bars, that I decided that the only way that made sense was what they were doing was protecting their family, putting food on the table, and trying to leave their legacy behind. Somehow this made sense to me at the age of 13. Somehow this made sense to me because I had so much anger in my heart that I decided that this was going to be my career path. Because when I stepped outside of the door, I did not see doctors and lawyers as my neighbors. I saw the gang members and the drug dealers. And so I decided at 13 that I would follow this path, even though my parents, for all of their efforts, kept on telling me to go to education, and I heeded their words now. And so at the age of 15, I ended up in detention. And in detention, they gave me an ultimatum. They said, either you stay in detention and you know where this is going to go, or you go to this thing called Eco Club. That was my ultimatum. That was just as bad as going to detention. And so I decided to take detention for what it was worth, thinking that it was something that I could do, not thinking anything more of it, but I ended up in the classroom, and Miss Glenda Pepin gave me a box of seeds. And she said, pick a pack. And the one I automatically went for was jalapenos. Because I remember the jalapenos that my mom grew in her garden and the ones that I took care of. But it also offered up an opportunity for me. It offered up an opportunity to show my mom that I could do one thing right. That for all of the messed up stuff that I was doing to my family and out there in the world, that I could do this one thing right. Now it's to grow these jalapenos. And so imagine me being a bald-headed kid, baggy pants, the whole cholito look, taking care of these jalapenos. And that's the only thing that kept me going back to school. That was the only thing that kept me going steady. And what I soon realized is that they tricked me, that all of a sudden, I started to worry about photosynthesis and pH balance of the soil and what irrigation systems would make my garden the best garden out there. At the end of that semester, I got an opportunity to apply for a scholarship, and that was to the Teton Science School in Grand Teton National Park. And if you've ever had the opportunity to be there, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, I encourage you to find the opportunity and the time to do it. It will cost you just as much as a ticket to Disney for a day, even less. And I ended up leaving home for the first time, getting on a plane for the first time, arriving there at night. And the first thing that I noticed about that was that I got to see stars. As soon as I stepped off the bus, it was dark, and I got to see stars. For the first time in my life, at the age of 15, I got to see more stars than I could count. For the first time in my life at the age of 15. And then I wake up the next day, and I'm greeted by these mountain ranges, which, if you've ever stood in heaven, this is my version of heaven. And somehow it clicked. Somehow it made sense. Somehow there was enough of my heart and soul in the middle of these mountains, and enough of my heart and soul with my family back in South Central LA to make sense of it all. To find that I made sense, that I had purpose in this world, and that my life was just as valuable as anybody else's. And I dedicated my life to that purpose, to empowering individuals to find their best in them for positive change in their communities. I do that through nature. I do that through nature because the one thing I found about the natural world was that the trees really don't care where you come from or what language you speak. The river doesn't look at your bank account. And the sun doesn't judge you for walking down a certain path or the choices that you make. And trust me and believe me that the mosquitoes really don't care who you are. They're still going to take a bite out of you. But I found that nature provided an all-equalizer for everybody, that regardless of who you were, you could become somebody out there. And that became a microcosm for the world that we were working on. So I got to study bison migration patterns throughout the Great Plains. Some of that happened here in Colorado. Got to work with then Mayor Villaraigosa in the city of LA to lead the campaign to plant 1 million trees in the city of LA and increase garden space. Got to take kids on expeditions to go tag great white sharks on the Captain Jack using submarines, two-person submarines. Got to climb the Grand Teton with legendary alpinist Conrad Anker, who's now a lifelong friend and mentor. All of these things happened because, and I'm going to skip the video because we have been given the cue of time. But what we know now is that the demographics of the United States are changing. And that change is dramatic. Already in the state of California, the Latino community has broken the 50% population of the state. We're the largest voting bloc in the United States that's growing. Ramirez is the second most common surname in the United States now. The Latino community influences $3.5 trillion of investments in spending. A lot of that is outdoor recreation. So you go out to the fishing pier at any given weekend or to the lake, I guarantee you will find Latinos, Asian, African American communities out there fishing and teaching and passing that legacy forward. But there is a lack of representation in the organizations, in the public land agencies, and the businesses that claim to be empowering the communities. And that's the opportunity that's presented here today. That yes, we are a growing community, we are a changing demographic of the United States of America, but the opportunity is to build that legacy forward. Not to change it, but to amplify it, but to move it forward. And if there's a leader in the movement today, that's Great Outdoors Colorado and the movement and the work that you guys have been doing. Taking one step further from just investing in conservation and preservation of public lands to looking at the inspiration and the action piece that comes with inspiration. Because the opportunity is no longer just having these one-off moments and these one-off opportunities of taking communities outside and introducing them to wild and open spaces in the great outdoors, but what happens when those communities come back home? How do you foster that relationship forward? How do you empower individuals to continue that relationship that are reflective of that community? And so in 2005, Richard Louv wrote a book called Last Child in the Woods. And in 2006, I got to sit with him and we talked about this phrase, nature deficit disorder. And one of the things he told me was, you know, Juan, we talk a lot about the movement and drawing a better tomorrow. And he used the example of Dr. King, and because Dr. King did not say he had a nightmare. He said he had a dream. And I'm looking at the young leaders today, and you guys are the ones that are going to drive us to that dream. You guys are the ones that are going to build that dream for us. Because together we can, and we will, and we have, and we know that with your support and GoCo here, we can do it. But the other reality of that, the flip coin, is that I come from a community that knows about nightmares, that lives them, breathes them, and knows them very well. So it's also a matter of building that cultural capacity within our own movement to acknowledge that there's differences within us, but that the greater good comes out of the common values that we share. We all want a better tomorrow. We all want to stand in action. And what I've come to learn is that those who stand with us in action, what I've come to personally know, and what I've come to understand is that first and foremost, I am a brother, a son, a husband, And that family to me means the world. It's the only reason why I've ever done anything that I've ever done. It's the only reason why I ever considered being a gang member. It's the reason why I know that mountains and rivers and trees matter, because it's about my family. And what I've come to learn is that family is those who stand with you in action. And that as this movement grows, as the Children in Nature Network movement grows, that those of you in this room are part of my family. So I'll leave you with this one quote, and these are all visuals of what we're talking about. These are the natural leaders that we empower and have a training every year that we hope to partner with Great Outdoors Colorado to bring to Denver here soon. That's my wife, which is awesome. She's also a Latina park ranger, Vanessa Torres, which she was in Grand Teton National Park when I met her. So it didn't take too long for me to understand that that was meant to be. But I wanted to leave you with this quote by Cesar Chavez. And it goes, once social change begins, it cannot be reversed. You cannot uneducate the person who has learned to read. You cannot humiliate the person who feels pride. You cannot oppress the people who are not afraid anymore. We have seen the future, and the future is ours. GOCO stands as a beacon of leadership in the nation. And what we can do together here, starting in Denver and greater Colorado, is really one of a kind. So I thank you all for standing with us in action. I thank you, the young leaders, for being here, and even though you guys might seem bored and not listening to me, know that I was in your shoes at one point, and because of who you are and where you come from and what you're doing today, people are going to be looking to you for leadership. So you guys are natural leaders, believe it or not. But at the end of the day, I do this because of my family. So again, welcome to my familia. Thank you.